Welcome to the first meeting of the City Council Economic Development Committee. My name is Curran Price. I'm joined by Councilman Huizar, who is certainly an old pro to these issues, and Councilman Kukurian, whom I've had a good long working relationship with over the years. We will soon be joined by Councilwoman Nuri Martinez, and I understand that Councilman Cedillo will not be joining us today. I was very pleased when the President appointed me to chair this committee. We know how important economic development is, not just in the 9th District, but really all over the city. And so I'm excited about working with my colleagues as we create a new vehicle that employs a variety of tools that I think will be very helpful as we move our economic development strategy forward. And we've got folks on the committee who certainly have good experience, good skill, good instincts of how to make those things move forward citywide. So I'm very, very excited. The fact that the city has a economic development department, a new department, is going to be, again, an exciting chance to figure out what works best here in Los Angeles and sort of pulling pages from other successful efforts around the country. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to build upon certainly the success that the previous department has had. Of course, we had CRA and a number of other tools at our disposal we don't have, but it's our job to figure out what the new and improved tools can be. And so I'm very happy to be chairing this committee with my colleagues. And let me invite them each to have a word if they choose to do so. Mr. Vice Chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say what a pleasure it's going to be to serve under your chairmanship. The very first chair at the very first meeting of this committee in its history. And I think we're going to be able to, it's an opportune time to create this committee as a standalone committee. Certainly, Los Angeles has been through, like the rest of our country, has been through the most dramatically difficult economic times in our lifetime. We're seeing recovery now, but it's very painfully slow, especially at the level of job creation. And so the mission of this committee in continuing to prime the pump and continuing to move the city forward in creating new jobs, attracting new business that will create jobs, and creating new economic vitality for our workforce is, it couldn't be a more important mission, and I'm pleased to be able to participate in that under your leadership. So welcome to your big chair, and we're looking forward to serving with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I look forward to working with you as well and my colleagues on this committee. As Mr. Krikorian said, this is an opportune time given the recession we are hopefully getting out of after it being one of the worst we've had since the Great Depression. But I think it's also an opportune time as the city is looking at the roles of its planning department and building and safety department and those discussions taking place, which are obviously some very important departments for the city with respect to economic development. So it's an opportune time to create a new vision and direction and pathways and create new tools on how do we create more jobs and economic development activity in the city. So I look forward to working with both of you as well.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we do have a quorum. We don't have any items on consent. Do we?
No, sir.
Do we not? Okay, great. Then why don't you call the first item?
Item number 1 is a city attorney report and ordinance relative to abolishing the Community Development Department, redesignating the Economic Development Department as the Economic and Workforce Development Department, and amending the Los Angeles Administrative Code to transfer administration of the economic development functions from CDD to the EWDD. And staff from the city attorney and EWDD are present to answer questions.
Great. Well, let's invite them up to the table.
Miguel Dagger, Deputy City Attorney.
Good afternoon. I'm Noreen Vincent from the City Attorney's Office.
Kathy Godfrey, EWDD. Well, soon to be.
Yeah, Robert Science, formerly of CDD and now of Economic Workforce Development Department.
Let me just comment, the interim executive director is not with us, former Councilwoman Jan Perry. She is, but she will be with us at our next meeting, I understand, so we'll look forward to her involvement and participation. Okay, why don't we hear from the City Attorney's Office?
Sure. This ordinance is basically the budgetary action to, I'm a little ill, so
Okay.
it's hard for me to talk.
Pull the microphone up to you a little
To
bit.
basically,
Pull the microphone up.
to basically repeal the former CDD and to distribute some of the economic development functions to the renamed Economic and Workforce Development Department, which was created as the Economic Development Department several months ago. Among the functions I believe that they're going to be doing are the administration of the Section 108 loan programs, which are the federally funded development grant programs, workforce development, the enterprise zone, as far as those still exist, sidewalk vending, the Industrial Development Authority, and other economic development functions. And I guess this is just the first step. So, I'm not
First
sure.
step, what other steps are going to be coming
What-
forward?
I think the what?
What other steps? You say this is the first step. What's
Well, this is the first step in establishing the department and setting out what they're really doing. I think that we'll have to be coming back. The department will probably be coming back with recommendations as to the types of things they can do. One of the things that we established when we created the Economic Development Department was the establishment of some development powers, such as the disposition and of property for economic development purposes. And I think further investigation probably needs to be done as to what other powers can be assumed, and more importantly, the funding sources that the department's going to be able to use, since without the redevelopment agency, the loss of tax increment is going to make the functioning of the big projects like the CRA did a little bit more problematic.
Anything else?
Not for me.
Just to also mention that the ordinance to create the new department, the Economic Development Department, was passed by Council. Council then directed us to essentially go back and rename it the Economic Development and Workforce Department in recognition of all of the job training and employment programs that were also going to be administered by the department. It wasn't until that department was created that we had an instruction from Council to go ahead then and eliminate what was the former Community Development Department. So this will change the name of the department to reflect the activities that are taking place. It will abolish what was the former Community Development Department. And in addition, throughout the Administrative Code and the Municipal Code, there were references to the Community Development Department. So this ordinance changes those references so that we have consistency now among the various codes and throughout the various references.
Okay, so a little more cleanup work left
So
to do.
this is also cleanup work to make sure that where we've changed we now have a new department. We want to make sure that in the Muni Code and elsewhere in the Ad Code, where it referred to community development, it now refers to community and workforce development. I'm sorry, economic and workforce development department.
Yeah, get those alphabets right.
Yes.
We've been joined by Councilwoman Nuri Martinez. Thank you for joining us. Members, any questions?
Move the ordinance.
Yeah. Well, I have one question, Mr. Chair. And so we're making the ordinance, and the ordinance is moving forward. In terms of the actual, where we are with the department, it's been set up, and it's going, and it's moving. Where are we in terms of the status of the creation of the new department?
Well, the functions of the department have continued. As you know, about one-third of the former employees of CDD have migrated to the Housing Community Investment Department, formerly known as the Housing Department. So we're in the process of completing the MOU and understanding in terms of the division of labor between the two departments. And that process is going forward, but the work itself has continued. Robert, do you want to say anything about that?
Sure. So our big pieces of work in terms of the workforce system is continuing operations. We had no interruptions whatsoever. Our youth source piece, which really focused on young people returning to school and into the workforce, is continuing without any interruption. The business source centers, which we actually expanded this current year, is moving forward and no interruption. We also have the day labor program, and we also have our specific economic development projects, which ebb and flow in terms of timing. The one area which is both a concern, but it's something that we're going to actually have to come back to the committee, is the former CRA projects. And that is adding a whole new workload to the department, which we didn't have a commensurate addition of staffing or resources. So right now we're currently handling it, but it's going to be a future consideration for this committee of how we want to resource the transfer of those type of projects to the department.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so
I'll move the ordinance.
the ordinance has been moved, and without objection, that shall be the case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2.
Item number 2 is a motion, Weisad Price Wesson, relative to instructing the EWDD, the Chief Legislative Analyst, and the City Administrative Officer to report with recommendations and funding necessary to immediately replace the state-level state enterprise zones and community redevelopment agency incentives, continue and increase existing city-level incentives, and create new programs which will be effective in attracting businesses and job creation to Los Angeles across all sectors, with a focus on areas identified as economically disadvantaged and with high levels of poverty. I believe we have staff from EWDD, DWP, Building and Safety, Planning, and the Office of Finance to answer questions.
Okay, will those departments join us, please? We certainly are familiar with the Enterprise Zone program. The state legislature and governor, in its wisdom, abolished the program. Several of us feel that there are some important and significant benefits from it, notwithstanding the abuse that has occurred over the years. And so the motion is to figure out how we can implement or at least continue those EZ programs in ways that can benefit the economic development objectives of our city. So the floor is yours.
Wendy Yancey, Water and Power, and I'm actually happy to report that our EZ program, which is a discount on the electric rate for about 5 years, is enforceable with all the existing zones intact as long as the city recognizes them. So we will continue to support that policy.
Okay. Any other comments?
Robert Science, Assistant General Manager, Community Development Department. Oh, wait, let me change it. We just changed it. It's Economic and Workforce Development Department.
Right.
So,
When we begin.
10 years is a little harder to make that change. So from our perspective, the enterprise zones were and are one of the major local tools that we have for economic development. And given the changes that are at the state level, we need to figure out our best strategy of how to bring those incentives locally and making sure that we're taking advantage of the full range of incentives that are available through the governor's office. But the local incentives, DWP, the planning, or the parking issues are all locally driven. And so we are going to review the administrative code with the city attorney just to make sure that we know the policy intent is to keep those in place, just to make sure that there's not anything that triggers from the administrative code that would impact any of those incentives.
Good. Any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And this motion was presented by the chair and myself with respect to the concerns that were raised. You know, we lost the CRA. We are losing the state enterprise zones, and the federal enterprise zones are going to expire at the end of this year in December. And at the same time, the city had its own incentives that used the state enterprise zones to provide those incentives. So now we lost the vehicle by which we would lose the DWP discounts, the parking relaxation and other incentives. So we just wanted to make sure that we are thinking about how we continue to provide those city incentives at the least. I know the next item talks about how we may configure ourselves after the enterprise zones are gone, and the state has provided us some direction on how to do that. But we wanted to keep an eye on how we continue to provide those city incentives, since they're just out there now with no vehicle to kind of move them through. So I would also like to ask then the report back for this, if we could also report back in the context of losing the federal enterprise zones, because we didn't include that. We mentioned to analyze this given the loss of the CRA and the state enterprise zones. But if you could also look at how the loss of federal empowerment zones, as they call them really, how that may impact our ability to continue providing city incentives.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the only other addition I'd have is, I'm sure this is already assumed by the language, but just to clarify, as we're examining alternatives to the existing enterprise zones, I want to make sure that our alternatives are not limited to sort of grandfathered territory, if you will. That in looking at these new alternatives, we will be looking at ways to expand into areas that may find that there's advantage in an enterprise zone concept, incentives, and also look at areas that are currently designated as enterprise zones, which may no longer be appropriate, or may feel that the incentives are causing impacts that are not justified by any job justification. Some of the areas in Studio City might be one example of those. So those are some of the areas that I would like to see explored. So in other words, let's not limit ourselves to the current geography of any of the zones.
Along the same lines as Mr. Krikorian, same goes for the East Valley. Council District 6 and 7 both have enterprise zones. So let's make sure that we're not limited to geographical areas in the valley is being taken care of and addressed.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for this motion, actually, because it really gives us an opportunity to think broadly of all of our economic development tools. And I really do think from local leadership, we're going to actually have to be able to think creatively and not be held to past structures, both geographic as well as other incentives. We estimated that the city businesses benefited about $63 million, and that was a conservative estimate, specifically with the EZ zones. So that $63 million that's going to be taken out of the economy, and we're going to have to be able to both replace it as well as think of how do we expand it to other businesses, and also to be smart in terms of how we actually target our incentives throughout the city.
Thank you. One final thought on that is, we are asking to see how we continue the city incentives, but also certainly an examination of what incentives we're losing, and if any of those really stick out, to continue them. Because hospitality, for example, we're no longer going to have those, and the state provided some huge incentives for hospitality, restaurants and bars that or entertainment areas that help revitalize some areas in downtown that some of them would never go to in the past. But now, because of the state enterprise zones, they were able to go there, take advantage of the incentives, and we have some older neighborhoods that are now beginning to revitalize themselves. And we shouldn't only think of downtown as a whole. I mean, there's places in pockets of downtown that some people would never imagine to have gone and set up shop, and now are sprucing up and making the whole area livable, walkable, and a place to go to entertain. So I know hospitality is one example, but there might be some other big ones that we're not aware of that say, hey, the state no longer provides this. It's not one of those, the reason we did away with state enterprise zones, because everyone was saying they're either taken advantage of or not being used. But there might be some big ones in there that might need to be examined, that we may want to create our own programs as city incentives as well.
Great. Good. Okay, let's go to the cards. And we've got Yeghel Canisian. Pardon my French.
Oh, that ain't French, sir.
Good afternoon. Yerik Kashishian with the Central City Association of Los Angeles, representing our 350 members, employing more than 400,000 individuals throughout the Los Angeles region. We would like to thank the committee chair and the respected committee members for their leadership on this issue, and state how CCA is in strong support of the motion before this committee. With the dissolution of the CRA and the statewide enterprise zones, the City of Los Angeles must do what it can to attract and retain new and existing businesses. Specifically, we need to identify new incentives on the city level to attract job creation in economically disadvantaged areas of the city with high levels of poverty. Two ways in which we can accomplish this is by 1, streamlining the development and permitting process, and 2, offering breaks in the form of the gross receipts tax. On the city level, we should also continue to offer businesses in enterprise zones many of the same incentives, hiring tax credits and business expense reductions, which were under the statewide enterprise zones helpful for many businesses. To succeed on this front, we need to properly fund the Economic and Workforce Development Department and make finding money a key priority. CCA stands ready to assist the City Council on this front, recognizing that creating high-wage jobs and investment is paramount to our economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and for your suggestions. Colleen McKinney.
Hi, my name is Colleen McKinney. I'm with the Los Angeles Food Policy Council. The LAFPC agrees with Community Health Council representatives that you'll hear from as well, that the city should, in exploring alternatives to enterprise zones, adopt a comprehensive economic development strategy for healthy food retail that supports increased full-service grocery store development, good jobs, neighborhood market conversions, and more equitable distribution of healthy food resources. Healthy food retail is a critical development tool for the city as it contributes almost 10% of LA's jobs through production, distribution, and retail sale of grocery items, helps to improve home values, and serves as a catalytic investment for larger retail development projects, particularly in low-income communities and communities of color. Support for fresh, affordable, and healthy food retail is particularly critical in low-income communities throughout the city where access to food retail is limited and often low quality. In Los Angeles, the areas with the highest poverty levels also often have the highest levels of nutrition-related diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, and obesity, which demonstrates the need for improved healthy food retail in these areas. To enhance the viability of healthy food retail in LA, the Los Angeles Food Policy Council supports the following concepts. The creation of a business development team that focuses on and aggressively pursues food retail opportunities in underserved LA communities, the development of concierge desk-type services, including a city liaison for food retailers to serve as a point of referral and to coordinate permit issues, marketing for existing and new incentives, support for the Community Market Conversion Program, which increases the capacity of many locally owned neighborhood markets to sell more healthy food products by supporting physical improvements and offering technical assistance, and pursuit of federal funding to support community food projects and investments. Thanks for your time. The Los Angeles Food Policy Council is available for you to address questions or provide additional information in support of healthy food retail in LA.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Tina Hassan.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Tina Hussein. I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce and our 1,600 members employing 700,000 people throughout the region. And I'm here to support this motion to coordinate city-level incentives to keep Los Angeles economically competitive. We thank the chair and councilmember Rezar for introducing this motion to make sure that we are properly assessing the tools at Los Angeles' disposal so that we can better leverage our resources to attract investment, maintain our job base, grow key industries, and encourage growth in underserved communities. The loss of resources provided by enterprise zones and the CRAs has left cities with few means to incentivize new jobs. But this challenge also creates an opportunity for cities to independently coordinate their programs and incentives to strengthen their local economy in a really targeted manner. This is the right time to have this important conversation as we face a vacuum of state resources for economic development. The Chamber looks forward to working hand in hand with you to create the right tools Los Angeles needs to attract and retain business and jumpstart our economy. Once again, thank you for your commitment to making LA more competitive, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and for your very good ideas. Looks like Rabia Brain. Was that a Robert? Someone from Community Health Councils? I'm sorry, sir. What's the name?
Robert Baird. Sorry,
Robert.
I didn't write that well.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm from Community Health Councils. We're a leading advocate for healthy food retail development in urban food deserts in Los Angeles. And we're also a point organization for deployment of the the CalFresh Fund in South Los Angeles, which is the biggest effort for supermarket development currently taking place in California. I think what sort of dismayed us the most about the enterprise zone reform bills were the new rules around hiring tax credits, and specifically the exemption of retail operators from those tax credits across the board. It would seem that the grocery retail industry was not considered whatsoever when it came to the formation of these bills. And we know from our regular conversations with grocery retailers in LA that the hiring tax credit is a major variable for the commercial viability of supermarkets in South Los Angeles. So losing access to this hiring tax credit would seem like a major unintended consequence of this bill. And it also undercuts the state's own policies for healthy food retail development, particularly the California Fresh Food Initiative. So we support this committee's efforts to move on to figure out the best way to move on from these bills. And we're here specifically to highlight the cause of healthy food retail development when it comes as not only a quality of life consideration and an equity consideration, but also an economic development consideration. And also we know that the grocery industry is currently working in Sacramento to try to get an amendment to these bills for that hiring tax credit. So as much as this committee could be willing to draft a resolution in support of that, we would encourage that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Certainly want to be supportive of that. We know that healthy food is an important component in quality of life, the quality of life in our communities. So we want to make sure we do all we can. Okay, Brianna Morrison.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Brianna Morrison, and I'm a policy analyst, also with Community Health Councils. Just to reiterate the statements that were already being stated about the importance of healthy food retail as a really efficient and economic and equitable solution for economic development, it's really important that we create a comprehensive economic development strategy that prioritizes healthy food retail development as a component of it. With the dissolution of the CRA created a market incentives program that was really supported by the former councilwoman Jan Perry that basically marketed the state enterprise zone programs and incentives as a really strong attraction tool to get healthy food retailers to invest in the state enterprise zone areas throughout the city. Now that we don't have that anymore, it's really important for us to be able to figure out a new way to be able to not only develop but to market incentive programs that can attract investment into these communities of need. One of the things that we've realized when we've spoken with retailers is that acquisition of land is a significant barrier for healthy food retailers, particularly in places like South LA and East LA, which have been historically divested. The CRA had the purview to be able to do that, and with the dissolution, that's a really strong barrier for healthy food retail. So we're looking to the Economic Development Department with their new purview over the city-owned surplus property to be able to prioritize some of those optimal parcels for the development of healthy food retail like full-service grocery stores, to be able to overcome some of those barriers. Some additional recommendations that we have include exemption from the gross receipts tax, since the profit margins for these healthy food retailers are now going to be decreasing because of the lack of the tax hiring credits. We also and we want to stress that the healthy food retailers that we're talking about are committed to standards of quality, including local hire, energy efficient operations, and the acceptance of SNAP, which brings in federal dollars into the city and has a multiplier effect. So we hope that you will consider these, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, Don. The squiggly G, is that Grant?
You'll get nervous. I'm going to have a hard time talking, too, with the air conditioning. I'm shaking all over right now.
Calm down and speak up.
Don't get old, people. All right. We're older. This is an issue that, since I've watched the basic growth of downtown Los Angeles for the past, since 1999, and I watched it from the vantage point of living in Skid Row. And we watch how we fought and we struggled to bring in businesses all over downtown LA. The people that benefited from the creation of the entertainment industry in downtown. From even the small storefront restaurants, cafes, and bars on Spring Street have been our young people. They could be coming here for the Hollywood dream, but they've been able to get hired on at these cafes, at these entertainment venues. When you searched, you tried to look for job training programs in that area. There were very few. Now, Chrysalis wound up with a $10 million renovation just 2 years ago. So what that's telling you is that these incentive zones, these incentives that were given to these businesses for downtown, for LA, and to be, taken away, I think it's great that Huizar has, and this committee has made this motion to pursue what needs to be done to continue our wonderful revitalization of the whole city. This is a city renaissance that this administration, this wonderful new administration, is bringing forward. Eric Garcetti has, even before he got elected, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, didn't matter, a month, was already having hack space programs for the kids. This is a committee, and this is a group of people that are going to be committed to making sure that poverty is not going to continue within the city. We're going to solve that problem. So thank you very much for what you're about to do.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate that. Okay, lastly, we have Carlos Alvarado. Pardon.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for the opportunity. Member of the Public Immigrant Policies Institute of Los Angeles, and we work with the street vendors. We support this measure because I know this is going to bring more, not only revenues to our neighborhoods, but also create opportunities for street vending, which is illegal right now. And if you see the increase of numbers of people selling on the streets, like yard sales, it's amazing. I'm working right now at in the area of MacArthur Park on 6th Street, and we are doing it in collaboration with the Rampart Police Department. And we are creating spaces where we can place vendors, to sell there without being on the street. So I'm glad the new department is mentioned, the creation of working up with the street vendors, and we're really supporting this effort because we know this is the informal economy that is our neighborhoods is living, and that is part of how they're making they're making the income. So I really support this effort, and I hope we will continue working together. Thank you.
Thank you. We certainly want to do all we can to encourage the entrepreneurial spirit in the city, and that certainly includes the street vendors and certainly our commitment to working closely with the community, making certain that we have some rules, regulations in place that protect vendors and the public. And I think that's the way we want to proceed. I have no more cards. Any other comments? Well, members, if there's no objection, let's continue this motion and ask the department to come back in 30 days with an update. Okay. So that's so ordered. We'll move on to item 3.
Item number 3 is a EWDD report and resolution relative to establishment of new boundaries for the Los Angeles Targeted Employment Area. And EWDD is here for a presentation.
Robert Science, Economic and Workforce Development Department. Get it right. What you have in front of you is a transmittal asking for approval of a resolution. And the resolution is really to continue our targeted employment areas, which is in essence our enterprise zones. The state legislation actually keeps the enterprise zones going to 12/31/13. So we do need to be able to legislatively have this on record that we're still utilizing our current state enterprise zones. Come January 1, the zones and the hiring credit, more importantly, go away as of January 1, 2014. However, the current businesses are allowed to continue the credits over a 10-year time frame, or utilize the credits over a 10-year time frame. So what this motion does currently is actually keep the city in compliance with the state legislation that requires us to have an identified target area employment area. This does not impact what was in the previous recommendation, which is for us to look at our local incentives, beyond the TEA. So this does not impact that.
Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering what the formula is. I don't want the whole, chapter and verse, but generally,
I don't know the chapter and verse.
how are the boundaries of the TEA appropriately determined? I'm looking at the map of the current boundaries, and it looks like it's by census tract. But knowing the socioeconomic conditions in the San Fernando Valley, there seems to be no rhyme or reason to it. There's some areas that clearly are underserved that aren't included, and some that are not underserved in the slightest that are included. And I'm just wondering, where's the logic to it?
Right. And I won't be able to give you the exact formula. These were state regulations that allowed the city to actually apply for the state enterprise zones. And under the state regulations, they had a formula that included unemployment of the area, income of the area. But the other factor was the commercial availability. And that's where the percentage of businesses and the commercial zone land really did allow it to bleed over into upper income areas. And so in that combination is where you got the current zones. Each of the allocations that were applied through from the city to the state were actually negotiated after the approval, but that was with a very limited negotiation, I think of up to 10%, or 15% to be exact.
Okay. And so the statute requires periodic updating to true up the regions that we have on our map with the current conditions.
And it's really about the census on the census tracts and driven by the employment and poverty. It is not an opportunity to actually revisit the actual borders itself.
Shucks.
No.
Shucks.
So this is sort of a ministerial action we're taking to...
Right. It's more of a ministerial action. The good news of what the governor did sign is that it allows the tax credits to actually track much more closely to the economic need of the cities. So the census tracts for the new AB 93 bill is really following the need of the city. You have to be in areas that are 25% or greater of unemployment. So you're going to see a much closer alignment to need than you currently see now. And then also the targeted employment. It used to be anybody was allowed on the former EZ zones. Now it's going to be the long-term unemployed. It will be the disabled, veterans, and folks on public assistance. Again, a very much more targeted need, and that was the intent of the state policy legislation.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other comments, questions? Are there any cards? Any public comments on this issue?
No cards.
No cards this time. Okay, seeing none, we're going to approve the resolution as recommended by EWDD, and we'll move forward. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. And members, any comments? Any parting shots? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.